It's time to engage, educate, and empower with Tracy Maxfield.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Engage, Educate, and Empower, the podcast which aims to highlight the social issues, life challenges, and day-to-day problems that our children, teenagers, and young adults around the globe deal with. Now, I'm not sure if many of you are aware, but this week is Tourette's Awareness Week. And Tourette syndrome or disorder is a neurological condition where the child or teenager presents with extensive vocal and motor tics. Now, as you can appreciate, when you are randomly spitting out words or mimicking someone, or have tics such as head jerking or eye movement, not only is it quite frustrating and embarrassing, but it increases the likelihood of social exclusion, humiliation, and bullying for the child or teenager. Now, today's special guest is Jake Melton, and I met Jake a couple of years ago after I wrote my book. And what's amazing about Jake is that he is now an adult. He has a wonderful family, a great career, and a very soul-satisfying life. And he lives with Tourette's. He's actually one of the very, very small number of teenagers that did not outgrow Tourette's, but actually continued throughout adult life. And I think it's going to be a really great podcast, because he's going to share his experiences of living with Tourette's as a child, as a teenager, and then as an adult. So Jake actually now lives in Utah, where he's a realtor. But in the past 8 years, he's actually moved 12 times. So when I connected with Jake first, he was living in Dallas, Texas. And Jake has come to appreciate what it means to live somewhere you love. Along with being a licensed real estate agent, Jake is a public speaker, author, and mental health advocate. In 2018, he published his book, Minimalize to Maximize Your Happiness, Cut the Crap. It's a book about the essence of minimalism and what it means to live a simplified, decluttered life. He has spoken to thousands on stages across the country and was a leading voice on LinkedIn in 2019. Jake initially pursued minimalism at a point in his life when he couldn't find any other options to cope with his mental health struggles. Diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and PTSD, he has also dealt with Tourette syndrome since he was a little boy. Jake has now become a proud voice and representative for the Tourette's Association of America and spends as much time as he can supporting Tourette syndrome and other mental health causes. Jake, his wife of 8 years, and their 2 beautiful children live in Salt Lake City, Utah. He loves real estate, design, exploration, traveling, Diet Coke, personal development, basketball, music, barbecue, and the beach. So as usual, we're going to take a very quick commercial break, and when we return, it'll be my utmost pleasure to introduce you to Jake Melton. We'll be right back.
Tracy Maxfield is a retired nurse with over 36 years' experience in mental health and dementia. She has spent years studying, researching, and writing on dementia care, mental illness, and bullying in teenagers. Tracy struggled with chronic depression starting in her 20s, and after years of intense workplace stress, bullying, and harassment, her chronic depression intensified. Tracy wrote her book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole, My Journey Through Depression, as a way not to only relieve her stress and anxiety, but to help her friends and family better understand depression. The book became an international guide for mental health awareness, allowing Tracy to focus her attention on helping children, teenagers, and their parents work through mental health issues and bullying. She travels all over the world to meet with schools, mental health advocates, and experts in the mental health fields. She also offers online courses to help children, teenagers, and their parents work through issues, bringing families closer and to bring awareness to bullying in society. For more information on Tracy, her mission, the show, Tracy's book, and offered courses, visit TraceyMaxfield.com. You can see the latest news on mental health, upcoming guests on the podcast, read Tracey's blogs and articles, and more. Plus, follow Tracey all over social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to watch the podcasts. See her daily messages and motivation and learn about each podcast guest and experts. Plus, while you're on the website at TraceyMaxfield.com, be sure to sign up for the free monthly newsletter. Follow Tracey with her upcoming events, interviews, seasonal tips, and the latest articles discussing important mental health topics and issues. And when you subscribe, you'll get a free copy of Tracey's booklet, Why Our Kids Are Suffering and How We Can Help Them. Just go to TraceyMaxfield.com. Tracey is committed to bringing parents and their children closer, to battle bullying and bring awareness to the mental health of children. That's why Tracey is offering her online courses to any adults, parents, children, and teenagers struggling during those hard times. Sign up for the course at TraceyMaxfield.com. You'll receive 8 full modules, over 12 videos, resources, and support discussing mental health, mood disorders, eating disorders, behavioral disorders, social media, drugs, suicide, risks and signs, and much, much more. Plus, you'll get access to Tracey's private Facebook group for individuals going through the same thing you are. Connect with others and share ideas, support, and motivation with Tracey helping along the way. Tracey's online courses is now for a limited time available for only $158. See all information online at TraceyMaxfield.com, where a brighter future is possible.
Welcome back, everyone. And as promised, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Jake Melton. Jake, thank you so much for agreeing to be on my show.
You bet. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So in my intro, I explained that we had connected a couple of years ago on LinkedIn. That was the big platform then. Now I'm not on it anymore, but we're still connecting through Facebook. And actually, I digress for a minute. Jake showcases some of the most amazing houses. I just, as you're flipping through, and there's so much negativity right now on social media because of this pandemic, but it's so refreshing because he'll suddenly post, "What do you think of this kitchen?" And I'll be like, "Oh my God." So thank you for sharing that part, because it's just, it gives you ideas, but also it's just so refreshing to see the way some people live, and just to look at a snapshot of their life, because right, your home, it captures who you are as a person, your family, your likes, and kind of reflection of your personality.
I think you explained that perfectly. I'm glad you've enjoyed seeing those.
So, and at the end, when we go to our second commercial break, there'll be Jake's social media links. And if you follow him, you'll be able to see some of those pictures, as well as learn about his book and also the work that he does. So, as you know, Jake, it's Tourette's awareness right now. And I just actually completed my YouTube video and blog post about that, which is also going to be airing, I believe, next Monday. And I was just amazed at the statistics. It seems that it's actually increasing.
Yes. Yeah. And it's, do you have any of those on hand? I'm just curious to hear. Do you have any of those?
Right now, so what they're estimating is that out of every 1,000 kids aged 6 to 17, 3 are now being diagnosed with Tourette's. And it is 55.9% of teenagers grow out of Tourette's. 13.6% will have it for life. And that is actually, as I explained in the intro, something that you have.
Yeah.
8% diagnosed for life will also have a chronic tic disorder. And 22% diagnosed for life will also have obsessive compulsive disorder. And interestingly, I think I'm going to pronounce it coprolalia. Is that it? It's coprolalia is when it's the swear words, right? And the socially inappropriate.
Oh, yes.
That only occurs in less than 15% of kids. because I know that's, I think, what lots of people find disturbing and has led to so many physical assaults of not only teenagers but adults if they are saying inappropriate comments, and people not understanding that it's actually this neurological disorder tend to, as we know, we've become a society where we act first and we
Yeah.
later. So please, in the bio, I said that you actually had Tourette's childhood, as well as you've had some other mental health challenges, as have I. So please share with us your story.
Sure, absolutely. It's interesting that you read, and as you mentioned, it's been growing as far as the cases and the awareness. When I was diagnosed a little over 15 years ago, I nobody really knew what Tourette syndrome was. There were a few videos out on YouTube that were making fun of more of the verbal tics that people who had Tourette syndrome had, and a couple things have been brought up more on the negative side. But I remember being diagnosed, I didn't even know what it was. And so that doesn't surprise me now as more research and evidence has been coming about what it is, that doctors and neurologists and psychiatrists and stuff are recognizing what Tourette syndrome is, and why these tics come up, and Tourette syndrome versus a tic disorder type thing. So it's been amazing how far it's coming, but still have a long ways to go, obviously. But yeah, I'll share my story with you. So I grew up in Southern California, and I'll kind of take you back to when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I was playing over at a friend's house, and we were sitting down on the floor playing. I don't remember what we were playing with, cars or Hot Wheels or something. And my parents were sitting behind me, his parents were sitting behind him, and they were just talking. We were hanging out. And I was doing this, and hopefully you can hear this. It was like a,
Okay, yeah.
and I kept doing it over and over and over again when we were playing. And my parents, it finally got to a point where my parents were like, Jake, you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm good. And I kept doing it. And it got to there. My friend's dad didn't really hold anything back. He didn't have a filter. So he looks over and he's like, what's wrong with your kid, basically? And my parents were like, I don't know, Jake, stop. And I said, I can't stop. I don't know what this is. This is weird. And that was really the first time I remember having signs of something, either a tic disorder, or that I didn't know then it was Tourette syndrome, but it only built from there. So I remember also being about 9 years old, I was in a play that my church was putting on, and I was doing something as well. Before I would go out on stage, I was making some sorts of noise and grunts in my throat. And then at the same time, I was also having some OCD issues where there was a staircase, and I'd walk up the staircase and walk down, and then I had to do it 2 more times. And then if it was uneven, I had to start all over again. I was doing things like touching doorknobs a certain amount of times, washing my hands a certain amount of times, and some of these OCD-based symptoms. And so finally, I grew up. When I was in high school and middle school, I played basketball. I acted. I was in drama throughout that whole time. And I was involved in Boy Scouts, the youth group in my church. I was very active in things. And I remember it was probably 15 or 16. I was in a bunch of plays during the school year. I was playing sports. And before I would go out on stage, I would have this blinking spasm. My eyes would go out of control, and I could not regain any sense of control to be able to just stop my eyes from blinking. At the same time, just a couple years prior, I was throwing my shoulder up like this. And it got to a point where my shoulder was in pain. I had a headache every single day. I was doing a bobbing thing with my head where I'd kind of go up and down like this and shake. And it was affecting my schoolwork so bad that it got to a point where I had to, really tell my parents something really is wrong. I know you guys have seen some of this go on. But I would also try and hide it too, because I didn't want people thinking something was wrong with me. I was really popular in high school, and I was like, I can't let anybody know that something's off with me or something weird. And there was one kid in my drama class before we had one of the plays, and we were in the green room in the back, and he was walking around and he was blinking his eyes. and he was running around the room blinking excessively, and he's like, who am I, and teasing me. And that was, I was teased for two things growing up. My white legs, because I have the whitest legs. Some people call me glow sticks. So I have super white legs, and this Tourette's, this blinking and these tics, right? And so my parents decided, you know what, this is affecting his schoolwork. It's now affecting his self-confidence and affecting relationships. So let's take him in. So they took me to one of the top neurologists down at the University of Southern California. And he did, you know, just a couple of the physical, like pushing on your stomach to make sure it's okay, doing the knee jerk thing, asked me a few really basic questions. We told him what was going on. And I swear it was 5 minutes, not longer than 5 minutes. He knew exactly what it was. Wow. And so I was sitting there with my parents, and he said, Jake, you have Tourette syndrome. And he was not a sugarcoating kind of guy. He was a big Armenian guy with a big mustache, didn't say things in, I wouldn't say a pleasant way. He was very bold and to the point. And so I was 16 at that time. And all I could think about was, what the heck is Tourette syndrome? Is this something that I'm going to die of later on in my life? Is this hereditary? Is this does this mean I can't play sports or act anymore? Does this mean I'm not going to make it in education and be able to go to college or even be able to have a family at some point? And, you know, I had all those thoughts going, and it was like a movie when they're sitting there and everyone's talking, but everything's drowned out because that's all you can think about. So that's what was happening. And eventually he got me on some medication. I met with a therapist and some other professionals, and it didn't really go away. And I kept hearing, Jake, as you get older, Tourette syndrome should decrease, and you should be able to get over this at some point. You know, this is a huge sidetrack, so I'll just mention, but I had a lot of life trials apart from this. I was eventually, from some of the things I've been through in my life, losing my dad was one of the big things. I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression in my early 20s. And then when I was 24, after my dad passed away, I ended up being diagnosed with PTSD, which I did not even know a regular person who wasn't in war or, you know, experienced a severe traumatic experience could be able to be diagnosed with. So as I got older and was experiencing these things, my Tourette syndrome, my tics actually were getting worse. And so I was thinking, okay, maybe it's just because of what's going on in my life. Maybe it'll calm down. And I'll just tell you, I'm 30 years old, and it's worse. It's been worse in the last 2 years than it was when I was a teenager. And so it's been interesting going through this. And, you know, there's no cure for Tourette syndrome right now. They're doing a lot of research and things, but you can meet with professionals and therapists and psychiatrists, and you can take medication, and you can try you know, some things spiritually or mentally to try and overcome it, but there's only so much you can do.
And I'm glad that you pointed out, I think what people really need to understand is that you have no control. They come on just like that, and you cannot stop them. It does not matter how much you shout and berate and threaten and intimidate that. It's out of their control. And I think that's where the frustration gets, is that lots of people assume you're doing it because you're being difficult or you're attention seeking or you want to be the class clown. And it's like, no, it's not. You have no control. And it's funny. So you said you played basketball and you acted a lot. Did you find that helped, like, calm it, reduce it?
It did, actually. Yeah. So, you know, when I was playing basketball, if sometimes I'd be nervous before a game, depending on who we were playing, and the tics would be bad. But as soon as I got out on the court, it was okay. Same thing with acting behind stage. Oh man, not good. But as soon as I walked out or those curtains opened up, it was gone.
And I'm glad you pointed that out, because yes, I mean, what research is showing is that if parents can get their child or their teenager involved in activities, sports activities, art, whatever, that it does lessen the frequency and the intensity of the tics. And so I think that's great because it enables you to have that control, to take back that little bit of your life, right? That you have to
Yeah.
hand over to Tourette's. So initially you were 16, you received your diagnosis. Obviously very confusing time because at 16 you're going through all the changes, you're becoming a man, you think you're a man. I mean, these are kids, right? I mean, was there any depression or anxiety attached at that point, or was it just kind of just simmering?
I believe there was. I think a lot of it was going back to that self-confidence and the insecurity. Even going to church or being in a class, I would always try and sit in the back because I didn't like people seeing what I was doing.
Yes.
And apart from that, though, a lot of the actual, which isn't talked about very often, the physical pain that you deal with because of these tics. So, people will ask about it and I'll say, imagine throwing your shoulder up like this, or bobbing your head up and down, or tightening up your neck and your nerves. I said, I'll tell people, by noon every day I'm wiped out. My body's exhausted. And so trying to make it all day, trying to do something, or even when I was in corporate and I was working a full day, it was so exhausting and draining because, by 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, you've done more workouts on your shoulders and your arms than most people ever do in a full-on workout at the gym or whatever. And, so I think that definitely impacted too, how I felt mentally, was that physical state of not feeling like I had enough strength, or the exhaustion, or just the pain in general.
Yes. And that's an important point because I think so many don't realize that it is painful. I mean, I always like to encourage people to take a step back and just sit for a minute and just imagine what it could be like. Because I think, they just think, oh, it's just a tic. It's an involuntary spasm. It's a movement, but not understanding that if you're going to be jerking your arm, it's the effect on the shoulder, the effect on the neck, the upper back. I mean, it's all, as we know, brain and body are connected. And so you get that whole body effect. Now, how was it were you dating at 16?
I was, yeah. I had a girlfriend when I was 16. It was actually, I didn't want to tell her. I didn't want to even tell my grandparents. I didn't want to tell my best friends. The only people that really knew at that time were my parents and my siblings. And I was scared. I was scared that if I told my girlfriend at the time that I had this, that she would break up with me, or that my best friends would be embarrassed or not want to hang out. And that carried over to when I was dating in college too. But before I met my wife, I was really worried about it. And it was funny, on our second date, I ended up telling my wife I had it because I knew I loved her at that point. I just had a feeling we would have a future together. And I said, I got to tell her now before she finds out later on and then ends up leaving or not wanting to be with me because I have Tourette's syndrome. It was never an issue whatsoever she was the right one for me. And that's a big reason why. But yeah, it impacted just relationships and meeting new people. I was always worried that, it would be a turn off, or it would put people off, or just ruin any sort of relationship. So for a long time, especially in my teenage years and early 20s, I didn't like to tell anybody about it.
And that's hard as well because it's so much work just trying to conceal the fact
Yeah.
something going on, and then add into that depression, anxiety, and then PTSD. Yes, because we know, right, that stress and anxiety and just inflammation in the body, if you're fighting an infection or an illness, it kind of seems to trigger everything much more. And it's like out of control. And so that I mean, I don't have it. I told you at the very beginning before we started recording, I went to school with a boy who at that time, again, I mean, you're 30, I'm old enough to be your mum. So, but back then it was like no one knew what it was. They used to actually refer to it as courier form movements, because it seemed very similar to Huntington's.
Interesting. Huh.
He had such pronounced head jerking and rolling, and then of course the entire body would go, and we knew that something was wrong. A few of the kids teased, but he was a brilliant boy, brilliant student. And I remember we always used to have a Christmas carol concert, and he used to be at one of the really big neighborhood churches, and of course parents and families and everyone came, and they asked him to do a Bible reading about halfway through. And so every week, it was about 6 weeks, we would go for practice at the church and, do our bit. And I remember mentioning to the teacher, because he was getting so embarrassed, and this was not even in front of an audience, he was becoming so embarrassed, because the more he spoke, the more the head jerking and the shoulder became prevalent, right? And he could not control it. And she said to him, oh, it would do him good. It would do him good to go out there and talk in front of an audience and conquer his fears and deal with it. And I remember thinking, I don't think he can control it. He was a bright kid. He wanted the teachers to like him. He wanted to impress everyone. And I remember the night of the concert when they called his name and he went up onto it was like a pulpit type stage. And there were hundreds and hundreds of people. Like, it was a very big church with 2-tier seating. And he started, and he had to stop after a minute because it was so bad that he couldn't even concentrate. And then he started again. And when you just sit and then you're cringing for him, but you could hear the titters in the audience of people laughing. And then you hear, and some parents were just plain mean, right? It's like, why have they even got him to talk? And he did it. And you could see when he was coming down the stairs, his face was beyond beetroot to start with. And even as he was coming down the stairs, could not control the movements. And, I felt so bad. That was that inner nurse in me that, like, since 2, I knew I was going to be a nurse. And it was not knowing what was wrong with him, but understanding that this was not nerves and this was not something that he could control. And I felt like he'd been persecuted. It was so, and of course, now everyone in the school, because this was the entire school that was there, not just our class. And so you can imagine from that point forward, the bullying, the teasing, it was just terrible.
That's, yeah. Gosh.
I think one of my reasons for doing this podcast is, we both share the mental health advocacy and, that need to get rid of that stigma and correct misinformation. But also part of it is the bullying, because if you have a mental illness or a mental disorder or any kind of disability, learning disability, neurological, it increases your likelihood of being bullied because you're different. And so, if we have a kid with Tourette's and he also has maybe a depression and then he's bullied, it's going to become it's going to get worse, and I don't think people understand how serious bullying has become. Bullying in my days was nothing compared to bullying today, because you also get the cyber part of it.
Yeah.
Got that 24-hour a day. And that's why it's, this show is to help educate and create awareness and give strategies, so we don't have another, even though you're young, trying to sit at the back concealing it. We don't have another 15-year-old who has to go and give a Bible reading in front of hundreds and hundreds of people who end up mimicking him. I mean, people don't understand that does so much to your brain. Your brain is not fully developed as a boy until you're 24 to 27. And so, it just breaks my heart that people do not understand what, taunting, what mimicking, what that bullying behavior does. It's torture, and
It is.
it scarres your brain. And it happens as an adult. I mean, um, as an adult, when you've experienced the Tourette's, and I know on LinkedIn, you used to post videos. You'd be in the car and you'd say, I'm in the middle of it, and it would be for 20 minutes. We would step into your life for 20 minutes and see what you were going through. And by the end of it, you were wiped. You were just so exhausted. And do you find, even as an adult, did you get nasty comments to that video when it was posted? There were lots of supportive, but did you also get the negative comments?
That was a really interesting experience. There was that video I think you're thinking of in particular. I think it ended up getting, I think it was like 350,000 views or something like that, which was a lot. There were thousands of comments, and I was hesitant before I posted it about some of the comments that would be put out. I thought maybe some people would think I was doing it for attention, or some people thought that I was using it as a platform to get views or whatever, which, I never even thought that would get that much attention. But I shared it again, like you said, to educate and let people know what it was that I was going through, so they kind of step in. So if they knew anybody that had it, that they would have a better understanding. And I will tell you that there was not one negative comment in those thousands of comments.
You know what? That makes me feel really happy about humankind.
I thought the same thing. I kept reading through, and I said, I still can't believe that there hasn't been one negative comment. I've never had an experience like that in my entire life, ever, on any video, any post, any conversation, anything. There was only positive, uplifting messages. I was amazed at how many people reached out and said, my son has this, my dad has this, my brother has this, my coworker has this. A lot of people, thanking me for, I didn't look at it this way, but people thinking I was brave for sharing that and things like that. And just a lot of uplifting, encouraging messages. And I'll never forget that. That was one of the coolest experiences of my life, to receive that type of support.
And I mean, I saw so many of the positive, although I didn't read every single one because there were a lot. But no, I thought it was, yes, brave, courageous, because I think when people actually see it up close and personal, and also you have such a large following on LinkedIn, so for all those connections who know you as, Jake the businessman, Jake the family man, Jake the author, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh yes, he has Tourette's, even though you've been very open about it. But to actually then see when you're going through it, I mean, for me, it puts you on a different level of respect to start with, because I say booyah to anyone who shares their story and just goes out there and says, look, this is what it's like. This is what it's like. This is what I'm going through. Because I think it helps convey your life to that person. And I think that's why they were so positive, but also so many people saw it, because standing back, as I said, I get people to step back and think for one moment, but it's nothing compared to the visual of, this is happening in the here and now. This is it. And, I think it gave people a very different perspective of the disorder in the positive, I think.
Yeah.
At the beginning in my intro, I said that you were in the small percentage that had Tourette's for the rest of your life into adulthood. But what's so awesome is that it doesn't define you, and I think this is really important. And I always say this: do not allow your whatever you're going through to define you. It is a part of you. It's a very unique part of you, and we're all unique. But do not allow it to take over your life. Um, and I said in the intro, like, you're a very successful businessman. You have an awesome family. You know, you love where you live, and you are showing that despite your mental health issues and this neurological disorder, that you are living life to the fullest and you're embracing life and enjoying it. And I think this is great for parents, for teachers, for teens who are watching this. Interestingly, um, I have a very high audience of 18 to 25-year-olds.
Wow, that's great.
It's really surprised me.
Yeah.
Definitely 13 to 18. I have a small percentage, but my highest audience are consistently males, 18 to 25.
18 to 25. Wow.
I find really interesting because it's not like I'm a Kardashian or a Lady Gaga, but very, very interested. And so that's why it was so important to have you on, because this is going to resonate with so many. And it gives them that hope, that, you know what, guess what? You can still have an awesome life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do not allow anything to change about you. So, with regards to the depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, that was recently diagnosed, how are you handling that?
So, as far as the PTSD, I feel like I've been able to pretty much overcome that. That was within the first, I would say, 2 years or so of losing my dad. I feel like I've been able to get through that pretty good as time has gone on. I've also gone through different medications and been meeting with, therapists and psychiatrists and stuff like that in the past that have helped. But I will tell you, as far as depression and anxiety, I'm on medication at this moment to try and help with that. And what a lot of people don't know too about Tourette syndrome is those who experience Tourette syndrome, when they do have are going through anxiety or depression or OCD, those are actually enhanced with the Tourette syndrome. Like you mentioned at the beginning, many of those who have Tourette syndrome have OCD. And when I was younger, I had a lot of things that were more OCD based. I don't anymore. But yes, so with the anxiety and depression, let's say I was dealing with that as a regular human being without Tourette syndrome, it would be like on a level 5, out of 10. With Tourette syndrome now, it's an 8. So I'm experiencing it. It's a little bit more difficult, which sucks. But that's the reality of it. And so I still deal with that on a daily basis, anxiety and depression. And, sometimes I don't even know what causes it. I don't know what to expect. There are times where going to the grocery store it makes me too anxious. There's too many people at the grocery store before the COVID-19 thing. There's too many people at the grocery store. And I tell my wife that she needs to go do the grocery shopping because it's making me anxious and overwhelming me. With the depression, there are days where I wake up and it's those days you don't want to get out of bed and the whole world is dark. And so, luckily I have a wife that recognizes and she knows basically when I wake up how I'm going to be for a majority of the day, and she's able to help and support me through that. But it's not easy at all. And, like you said, you can still get through life and still accomplish things. But there are days where you feel like there's no hope, or days where you feel like it's too much to handle or too much of a burden. And that's okay. I feel, that's what all of this is, the depression and anxiety. That's what those feelings are. But it's important to have someone aware of it so that they can help you, whether it's a spouse or a significant other, or boyfriend, girlfriend, best friend, brother, sister, mom, parent, whatever. Have somebody there that can help you, that you can talk to. Because when you go through those things alone, I can't think of any worse feeling than going through depression or being anxious and being alone. So
It's not easy, because When I say I went through it on my own, I didn't have a support system because I had just divorced. I was living on my own. But I had an awesome doctor and I had an awesome psychologist. And, really, I knew that I could turn to them at any moment. Um, but it is, I mean, it is very hard. And that's why I keep urging people, parents, family members, if you're a child or a teenager and you're going through Tourette's or any other health problem, mental illness disorder, anything, being bullied, if you can't reach out to your parents, reach out to a trusted adult. And I always keep saying, when people are listening to the podcast, even if you don't have children, don't sit back and say, not my problem, not my responsibility, because the greatest gift that you can offer a kid is to be a role model or a mentor or just someone that can be there, who can listen to them and offer some guidance, but just let them be, be their sounding board. They can come over, develop that relationship of trust, because that is what kids need. And some kids, unfortunately, do not have a parent who is in that position to offer them that support. It could be your best friend's mom or dad, but find someone, a teacher, a counselor, and really talk to that person. Go to them, even if you can't come out and say everything the first time. Just sit and talk, and as the adult, just be there with them. Sometimes it's just being there present with them in that moment is more meaningful than anything else.
Absolutely. They never forget that.
They don't. They absolutely don't. And that's why I feel we all have a role. I mean, they say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it's not a village anymore now. It's like it's a state. Country.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every adult can play a significant part in being there for a child or a teenager or a young adult when they need it the most. And it may be just something as simple as sitting there sharing a can of pop. You don't know what that kid is going through, and it may be they just need to have that safe connection. So we all need to step up. So it's interesting, you're talking about depression and anxiety. 40% of kids with Tourette's will actually go on to have an 36% will have depression, 33% will have OCD, and a whopping 64% of kids who have ADHD also will have Tourette's. That's...
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot.
So they're saying amongst children diagnosed with Tourette syndrome, 79% are diagnosed with at least one, even two additional mental disorders, developmental disorders, or behavioral conditions.
Oh, man. Yeah.
More than ever, we've got to be there for those kids, because yes, anxiety, depression is hard enough. Throw in a PTSD and you're like a ticking time bomb. Add in the Tourette's, especially as a teenager, when you're trying to plan your whole life and you have all these dreams. It's a cruel world out there, so we need to be a little kinder.
Yeah, we all do. You can never be too kind either.
I 100% agree. Now, you have two adorable kids. You have a girl.
Oh, thank you.
So
I do.
The girl is the oldest, and you have a little boy, and they're just, dolls. I mean, come on, Jake. Mum is
thank you.
Stunningly beautiful. So.
Oh, thank you. She is.
They have some gorgeous kids. Have they seen the Tourette's? Have they seen any of the tics?
They have. Yep. My Haven, she's 5. She's the older. She has seen me do a couple things. I'm trying to think when it was. She was probably 3 years old or so when she first recognized some things I was doing. I think it was something with my shoulder. or we'd be laying down, snuggling or watching a movie, and I keep jerking, and she would kind of get frustrated with me and be like, "Dad, why you keep doing that?" And so I kind of sat down and talked to her, but my wife actually did and said, "Hey, this is just something that happens to Dad and something he can't control." And it was amazing to see her reaction to that. It was just, "Oh, okay." And that was it. It's part, like you said, it's part of Dad, and that's it. That's fine. And sometimes it'll happen. And my daughter's very aware of what people are going through. So that's a gift she's been given, I believe. And if she sees me, she'll come up and she'll put her hand on me and she'll say, "Dad, are you okay? Um, are you having, are you ticking right now, or are you having a spasm, or are you having whatever?" And I'll say, "Yeah, I am." And she'll scratch my neck, or she'll rub my shoulder, or she'll just sit next to me. It's so cute. But she's very aware of it. My little boy, I don't think he's really even realized it. He has never said anything about it, but he just turned 3. So I wouldn't be surprised if later on in the year, bless you, that he won't say anything. But it's just part of Dad, and they love me, and it doesn't matter.
And I think that's awesome because kids are born to nurture and love and are kind. You've got to see, all you have to do is see them interact in the playground, and it's when the adult influences come along that skew their vision, their idea of what is life. And so I think the more that we're able to share with kids, even at a young age, when they start noticing things or asking questions, it enables them to understand, and they become so much better. They become kinder, better kids, but also it helps when they go to school. So if they see someone who's being bullied or someone who isn't managing as well, that's the kid that's is going to go and reach out and be their friend or help them. And we need more of that as well. We
Yeah.
call them the upstanders, right? Don't be the bystander. Be the kid who makes the difference. Be the upstander. Just go and offer that. Are you okay? So it's almost time to come to a close, Jake, but I'd like to ask you 2 questions. So words of wisdom.
Okay.
So if there's a child, a teenager, and I would say teenager or young adult who's sitting watching this and has been diagnosed with Tourette's, what would you say to them? And then the second question is, if a parent or a family member is watching this and they have a child or a grandchild or a nephew, or because it is more common in males than females with Tourette's, what words of guidance would you offer them?
The big thing that comes to mind is, and this is based off personal experience. Like I said, when I was diagnosed, through the rest of my teenage years and into even my mid-20s, really, I didn't tell anybody about it. And so I lived every single day trying to keep it compressed, trying to not call attention to myself, worrying about the judgments of other people, feeling self-conscious. And what I've come to find out, and I learned this later on, especially after posting a video and posting on social media that this is what I was going through, this is when I really learned that lesson, was people are more accepting than you think they would be, or more understanding, more loving, especially once you explain what it is you're going through. And so I wish I could go back and tell my friends in school. I wish I could go back and tell the people that were at my church. I wish I could go back and tell people who were in my classes, whatever, that was what I was going through, because I feel like I would have lived a more peaceful, calm, less anxious life, worrying about what other people thought. And I know you're not supposed to worry about what other people think, but you do when you're, especially when something's outwardly visible. And I'm not saying that's easy by any means, but I think teenagers, young adults would be more surprised than not that if they shared this with people would be understanding, and it relieves a burden. It lifts something off of your shoulders when someone's watching me do this, and they know what I'm going through, and they're not thinking about it. But until you tell somebody, all you're thinking is they're looking at me, they're watching me, they're thinking I'm weird, I'm nuts, I'm whatever. And so once you let that out, you feel so much more free. So if you can gain the courage to be able to do that, that is what I would say. Start by telling the people that you love and you're closest with, and then start telling other people. If you need to tell your teacher who can explain to the class, if you need to tell, your congregation or a leader or something who can also spread the message around. Or here's where the parent comes in. You can have a parent, if they're on a basketball team or a soccer team, a parent email out to the other parents so they could tell their kids and educate their kids about what their kid is going through. It comes down to that education piece, and people will understand and be more accepting of that. And it just helps. That's my one piece of advice. And for parents, it's also obviously being educated and understanding what Tourette syndrome is and the effects that it can bring. But again, and most, I would hope most parents would do this anyways, but letting their kid know or their child know that they love them and that it shouldn't define them. I would love to just bring up this has been one of the greatest blessings in my life. So I didn't even discover it's called the Tourette Association of America. Didn't even discover them until a few years back. And there are chapters around the entire United States and maybe even other parts of the world, I'm not sure, but at least in the United States, there are chapters in all of the major cities across America that get together, and their kids or teenagers with Tourette syndrome. And parents will go to these, and a lot of it is just bringing support and awareness, and there's charities involved, and there's research. And there was a program they just came up with about a year and a half or so ago called the Rising Leaders for older teenagers before they go into college, who can be examples and help those who are younger understand how they can build confidence and self-awareness and become stronger, from this, what they're going through with Tourette syndrome. And so I would encourage all the parents and anybody who has it to look into the Tourette Association of America and just become active with it and start interacting with other people who have it. And it's just, I spoke at an event in Orlando almost a year ago, and I'll never forget it. I'll never forget the love and support that was there, and how it felt just to be there with people who are going through what you're going through.
No, and that's awesome. And I'm glad you actually brought up the Tourette's Association of America. Awesome resources on there. And I know Canada has another one, and Canada has a similar program. They have a youth ambassador program.
Yes.
So, again, these are great things to get your kids involved with, because it helps them take control and learn more about themselves and not have that embarrassment, but also it empowers them to help others. And, to reach out to someone same age as you, maybe across the country, who's going through some things, how awesome is that you can, contact them and say, okay, this is what's helped me. Don't worry, you can talk to me about anything. Peer support, especially for teenagers, is so vitally important as well. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's awesome. Jake, it's been an absolute pleasure. I consider talking to you today a gift. It's been awesome. And I'm so very proud of all that you've done and is continuing to do. And I wish you all the very best. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. It's been a gift for me as well. And always here to support you in your mission and behind you all the way. And I think you're changing lives, whether you see it or not, but on a daily basis, you're making an impact. And I'm proud and honored to be on a show like this one that has so much good behind it. So anything I can ever do, you let me know, and I'm here to support. Thank you so much. So guys, we're going to take a very quick commercial break, and actually we'll find out all about Jake and his social media links and his book. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Jake Melton is a Utah realtor, a public speaker, author, and mental health advocate. Jake's book, Minimalize to Maximize Your Happiness, Cut the Crap, is a book about the essence of minimalism and what it means to live a simplified, decluttered life. As a public speaker, he's spoken to thousands of individuals on stages around the country and was a leading voice on LinkedIn in 2019. Jake wrote the book after pursuing minimalism at a point in his life when he couldn't find any other options to cope with his mental health struggles. Jake's been diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and PTSD, and has also had to deal with Tourette's syndrome since he was a little boy. Jake now is a proud voice and representative for the Tourette's Association of America and spends as much time as he can supporting Tourette's syndrome and other mental health causes. Now Jake lives in Salt Lake City, Utah with his wife and his 2 children. He still loves real estate, design, exploration, and traveling. Make sure to check out Jake at jakemeltonrealty.com or find him all over social media at Realtor Jake Melton.
And welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Jake Melton. Please be sure to check out his book and his social media links. I think you're going to like his Facebook page. If you're interested in learning more about Tourette's, please do check out my YouTube video and accompanying blog post, which can be found on my website. This Monday, we will be releasing Tourette's syndrome in children and teenagers, what you need to know to help them. Also gives a little bit of information regarding diagnosis, the different types of tics, and some facts. So this wraps up this episode of Engage, Educate, and Empower. As always, I'd like to tell everyone to please stay safe and stay well, and be sure to check out next Thursday for another episode. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.